Appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I got a lot of witnesses here, so I'm going to try to be as expeditious as possible. So, you've already heard from a lot of witnesses that talk about the complexity of local taxes. I think we can all agree that they effectively become a Gordian knot, where when you pull on one end of the knot, it gets tighter over here, and vice versa. And that's one of the great challenges that's happened as we've built these things up over here, the years. So one of the things that I kind of want to focus on is actually somewhat less the property taxes themselves than what is really the kind of the cause of the property taxes. And that is the size and complexity of actually local government, how we deliver our services, the complex interplay of these different jurisdictions, including many of the taxing authorities that have been created over decades. Because if you really think about it, all of this conversation is essentially downstream from the structure of government and the structure of how we deliver all the services that taxpayers want. We know we want public safety, we know we want clean roads, we know we need potholes filled, we know we need trash picked up, we know we need certain core infrastructure like sewers and things like that to be taken care of and operate appropriately. But what are the other things that we absolutely have to have, and how do we fund those? Obviously, Ohio has a lot of local government. Over 900 different municipalities and villages, there are cities and villages, over 1,300 townships, over 600 school districts. And in a lot of ways, Ohio, and it's a Midwestern thing, it's not just Ohio, but we are particularly prone to this, is the nature of home rule within our Constitution and the proliferation of all these local governments. And the fact that when Ohio first became a state, you had a lot of this for transportation, getting people around to where they could see their local government officials and things. It was a lot different. It was a much different time back then. But this is the 21st century. We do have technology. We have Zoom. We have the capacity to travel from one end of the state to the other in 2 to 3 hours. Some parts a little bit further. I'm talking probably Senator Bryan may have the longest commute of anybody on the committee there. So I know that it's a little more than 2 hours. But we're not talking about hours upon hours. So how do we navigate and get back to efficiency? And I think that is one of the key things that we want to see. So several things I would encourage is we also have all these different taxing authorities that have, in many cases, direct ballot access. In other words, the commissioners oftentimes can approve things, but there are certain things that can go to the ballot whether the commissioners really want it or not. One of the things that I have long thought about, and maybe the county commissioners might want to throw a dagger in my back by saying this, but the county commissioners should actually have more authority. Some folks need to be able to look at what is going on in their overall county and make decisions about what's going on. Now that's a controversial topic, and I bet I might get some questions about that. And it's not foolproof, and it's not a silver bullet or anything like that. But what we need is we need the ability to think strategically about what's going on within an overarching geographic area. If we had a children's services levy in the primary, and we have a school levy in the general, and then maybe next year we've already talked about the senior levy coming up, or the library levy, or if you're in a certain county like Franklin County, you have a zoo levy, or you have a community college levy, or you have any of these other things that are out there. Maybe we need to have a strategic sense as to who needs the revenue most under this set of circumstances, and who is in a position to understand the economic situation that is going on, and who understands the aggregate burden of all of these levies that impact residents. So, it doesn't have to be the commissioners, but I think we need to think a little bit bigger. We need to decide, how are we putting all these things on? We need to have a more holistic approach rather than every single type of entity looking for what they need. And I get it. We stovepipe things, right? If you are working in one particular field, that's what you know. You know what the needs are for your particular government body. You know what you think you need, obviously, to serve whatever the relevant constituencies are that you're there to serve. But do you know what the constituencies are in other things? And who is looking out for that? And who is looking out, again, for the taxpayers overall? House Bill 331, I forget if it's actually passed yet, but I know it's Representative Matthews' bill. I think it's in Ways and Means, or no, actually, I forget which county committee it's in right off, but it's not the villages, it's the dissolution of villages. And it creates a whole system for looking at villages and saying, hey, are these villages accomplishing what they need to do? Are they really doing the services that they need? Can you even get people to run for all the village council positions? And if you can't do all the services, or you can't consistently get people to run for every one of those seats, should that village be in existence at all, or should it dissolve? And so House Bill 331 we think is actually a good idea. Ben should already testifying on that legislation to facilitate a process where after every census there's an examination of whether these services are being done, and then a question would be put onto the ballot so that the village could be voluntarily dissolved by a vote of people, not a mandate. It would still be a vote, but people would have the opportunity to do that. I actually might go a little farther than even the 331 and say maybe after every census we should just put every village that hasn't hit the point on, but that might be a little cumbersome for the boards of elections and things, so that's another topic. But this is about cleaning out good government and keeping good housekeeping. There are villages that do great work. I have no doubt voters would keep them around. There are some villages that might not do great work. And so the question has to be, if that's the case, should they get dissolved back into the township? How do we manage that? Those are a lot of serious questions, but do we need a municipal income tax for that village? Do we need to do that? These are the kind of things people have to ask. And we haven't really been asking these questions enough. But this all, again, gets back into how to deal with property taxes. Something that I assume Senator Blessing might be interested in is property tax abatements. It's something that we have a lot of concerns with. We'd like to see a lot less of those. I know it's unrealistic to say that there would never be that. There could be some distressed areas where it might make sense. There's obviously opportunity zones, issues and things of that nature where having investments might be essential in order to get development. But in general, we have a heck of a lot of property tax abatements for properties that could otherwise be developed. And what we're essentially doing is we're turning our property tax into Swiss cheese, especially for a lot of municipalities. Now, that's okay for a lot of municipalities because they then think they can get the money from the municipal income tax, which is another problem that Ohio has. But they then carve it out. Schools usually get made whole. There's a lot of times pilot payments taken care of. School districts will work out arrangements and things like that. I don't know if they always get taken care of 100%. But they, a lot of times, will get some degree of something from developers and arrangements there. But what tends to happen is, for a lot of the other services, you get stuck back on the hamster wheel of the levies because of how we work with the 920 reduction factors and everything else. You have services that now have to go to the levy sooner than they otherwise would because you have entire tracts of land that are being carved out of the property tax base. Good tax policy is to tax more things less. And that's one thing that Ohio has a tendency to do wrong, frankly, is we tend to try to tax less things more. And that then puts the finger of government on the scale and creates a problem. And many other cities throughout the whole country get a far different matrix of their revenues from a mix of property taxes and things, as well as other forms. We certainly couldn't just do that right away because we have high property taxes, relatively speaking. But we need to look at these property tax payments. We need to start closing some of these loopholes so that we have a more robust property tax base. Some other things that I'll put in very quickly.
If I could ask you, really need, I mean, we're running up against it.
So finally, I would also say we need to be very careful about unfunded mandates for local governments. We need to be very careful whenever that gets passed. I would also say the state needs to think about how they strategically share some resources. We have things like the local government fund, we have the public library fund that are tagged on to the GRF. But we also probably should think about how do we make sure that we have the state taking care of the core things that local governments need. We should reevaluate how the LGF gets distributed so that it's distributed to those that are most in need, so that we're not then, again, shifting the burden down on the property taxpayers. So, and transparency. We have a bit of legislation right now about the online checkbook to put it on. I think it's Representative Young as one of the co-sponsors. We like that concept. We also think that being able to take a look at all the property levies and listing out all the levies, every single one that's on your property. People really don't realize you have 20, 25 levies that go back decades. People see a number, they don't see the list. And I think the list shocks people when they see that. I think we should make that something that is also quickly available so that local taxpayers can understand and then bring about accountability and maybe begin this push to addressing some of these other issues. With that, I will conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony.